Welcome to the Southern California State Militia Radio Show. My name is Tony Burton. I'll be your host.
Well, welcome to our very first show. I'm really excited about this. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's finally happening. There's a lot of stuff to go over. First, I just want to let you all know that we are so appreciative of all the patriots that have come on board and made SCSM what it is. Without you guys, we'd be nothing. We've been running for about a year and 2 months right now, and we have a very, very strong group. We're part of a larger group up in Northern California called the Northern California State Militia Group. Our major is Major Jim Haagenson, which, by the way, we're going to have him on later on in the show. He's going to be discussing his new book and talking about militias and all kinds of good stuff. We will be running these weekly for now. Try not to make them too long, but we do want to get this information out there to you. I'd encourage you guys also to go to our video website where you can see videos of our FTXs and different things like that, some backpacking tips and tricks and survival things and so on. Just go to youtube.com/user/Big T videos. You'll be able to find a bunch of videos there. I'd also like to encourage you to go to our Modern Militia Movement website. That's where we have most of our information at. We have postings of FTXs and all that. And if you just go and Google Southern California State Militia, you'll find us on both Facebook and you'll find us on the Modern Militia Movement website. Once you get to the Modern Militia Movement website, if you look under state groups, you'll see us right there. We're tagged up with Southern California, Northern California, and Central California state militia groups. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/S.C.S.M. There you'll find our Facebook page. Our guest today is Major Jim Haagenson of the Northern California State Militia Group. Major Haagenson has an incredible amount of accomplishments behind him. He was active 4 years in the military, 14 years as a reservist. He has a total combination of 13 years of police and correction officer duties. He's sailed around the world. He's a novelist. He's married to a wonderful woman, Mary Haagenson. I'd like to introduce Major Jim Haagenson, a very good friend of mine. How are you today, Major?
I'm really good and glad to be here.
Yeah, this is really exciting. This is our first podcast, and I'm honored to have you as our first guest. And there's a ton of questions that I've asked different people that don't know about militias, people that do know about militias, that I'd like to ask you. And then I'd like to get into your book.
Okay, great.
All right. First off, I'd just like to ask you, what does the militia do? This is a question that I get from a lot of people. How would you best answer that?
Mostly the militia trains and organizes for unknown contingencies, future situations such as disasters or insurrections, invasions. I mean, if you go back to the founding of the Constitution and the country, they mentioned the militia several times. And in most states, when they were founded, they mentioned the militia when they were organizing the state governments. It predates the country as a whole. It goes back to ancient times, really. The people were the republic's militia or the nation's militia in old times, and in the modern American times, they're still a legal entity. We're still on the law books. Many people just don't know about it. They're not familiar with it, but the basic mission of the militia was to be prepared to repel invasions, insurrections, that sort of thing. But in modern times, we've expanded, so we train for other things. But mostly that's what we do is train and prepare. The missions we normally carry out that are not training are things like search and rescue missions. That's probably the most common, real mission that we carry out today.
Oh, very good. So what would you say is the purpose of the militia today?
Well, the purpose, that's a little more hard to define. Mostly it's to prepare, be prepared. If you think back to the situation after the Hurricane Katrina hit back in New Orleans a few years ago, you saw that the population as a whole were pathetically helpless. Population's response, if they did not flee ahead of time, was to stand on the roofs of their submerged buildings and hold up cardboard signs saying, "Help me." That had a big impact on me. I looked at that, having always thought of myself as a bit of a self-reliant person. I saw that, and it was a bit disappointing that the American population had grown to such a point where it was totally pathetically helpless, that all they could do was hold up signs on the roofs of their homes and say, "Help me," that they were not capable of even helping themselves. And I thought to myself, that's not the way America's supposed to be. And I think the older you are, the more you tend to understand that. Younger people, they're not familiar with self-reliance and the ability to take care of themselves. Many of them grow up on food stamps or living in Section 8 houses provided by the government, food provided by the government, Medi-Cal provided by the government. They've grown up in a world where everything's provided by the government, and many of them don't understand the whole theory and philosophy of self-reliance. When the Republic started, government didn't do anything for you, so they simply protected you from the evil deeds of others. Well, that's changed a lot. So when we started this Republic idea out, the great American experiment, the militia was the people. The people were the militia. It was basically the same thing. And I think there's a lot of advantages to getting that back into existence. So that's kind of why I do this and what I think we're supposed to be doing, so that we're not just helpless people.
How does the militia prepare today for these disasters and these potentialities?
Mostly by training and organizing. We've got our own websites now. cal-militia.com is our primary local site, but there's a national website called the modernmilitiamovement.com, which has pages for virtually every state in the country. And many states are broken up into regions and sections where there are different militia units where people are trying to organize and train. So most of the time what we do is we train and organize. We get together, we train recruits, have advanced training so that units can operate independently, make plans and carry out drills for disasters, and try to prepare the membership so that they're self-sufficient come an emergency. The last thing we want to be in our communities are the people holding up signs on the roof saying, "Help me, help me." So that's what we're doing nowadays to prepare. We meet, plan, train, organize.
Today, the militia, are they run by the same laws as, say, military?
Not exactly. The founding laws are very similar. In California, for example, the laws are based on federal laws that predate California. But the California government established the Military and Veterans Code, and Section 120 through 130 deals specifically with the militia. The other sections deal with other parts of the military and the reserves and the National Guard. But Section 120 through 130 specifically deals with the militia, and it clearly defines who the militia are. And it's an old legal language, but it says that it's all able-bodied men ages 18 to 45, except for a few exempt elected federal officials, certain mariners and pilots. So it's mostly everybody. There's only a few exceptions. A few federal officials are exempt, but pretty much every able-bodied male in California, 18 to 45, is in the militia, whether they know it or not. It's a little bit like jury duty. You know, you can live your life peaceably and happily, and you get a summons in the mail from the local superior court that you've been summoned to jury duty. Well, presto, you're a juror. That may not be what you normally think of as on your resume, but when you get called, that's what you are. Same applies for militia. If the governor calls you up as a member of the militia, you've got to show up. And the penalty isn't like jury duty. It's not just a misdemeanor. They will declare you a deserter and imprison you if you fail to show up. So it's there. It's legal. It's in writing. Most people just aren't familiar with it.
How does the militia today, in particular California State Militia, choose leadership, and is there a chain of command?
There is is a chain of command, yes. It's very similar to the Army or Marine Corps chain of command. Generally, we model our ranks and positions after the Army. The leadership is chosen a couple of different ways. There's earned rank. New recruits can earn their first stripe by completing recruit training, which is a series of classes, basically. And then they can advance from that position by completing different sets of skills. We have a level 1, 2, and 3 for skills, which are soldier skills, basically, how to become a warrior, be an effective soldier as a citizen. And then higher ranks are chosen from amongst people who've completed the level 1s. They're given a vote. And they choose platoon sergeants and platoon leaders, and company commanders, first sergeants, that sort of thing, by vote. We generally allow a vote anytime a majority of the membership wants to have one, so that there's not a fixed program, such as every year or January 1st there's a vote. We don't do it that way. We thought about it, but it seemed impractical. And if you ended up with a bad leader in a position, you thought somebody was good, they turned out to be good. It seemed that we didn't want the people in the militia to have to suffer through what the people in the country suffer through when they get a bad president, where you've got to go years before you get a chance to unelect them. So the membership with a vote can call for a vote anytime. And if a majority votes to remove or in place somebody new or remove somebody, they can do that.
How is the militia different than the military?
Well, they get to vote on their leaders, for one. It's much more people-centered. In the military, you have a hierarchy. It's a very complex process to become an officer, and it usually takes 4 years, either through the academies or through university, and then you're commissioned, and then you work your way up from one rank to the next. And then the people below you, the people in your unit, have no say, generally speaking, about whether they approve of you or they don't approve of you. They're just stuck with you. And so the militia, that doesn't exist. Now, we use the same structure because the military structure is pretty efficient. It's like any normal corporation where you've got an organization and a chain of command, and information goes up and down the chain, and decisions are made and passed down. But generally speaking, in the militia, everybody has a voice. In the military, you just follow orders, and that's pretty much it.
The militia of today seems to have a lot of negativity behind it. The Timothy McVeigh incident, all these different militia groups, they seem to have really tainted the name of militia. How is militia today dealing with that negative press?
Well, I'm not sure that I would say we're dealing with it. The negative press we have is mostly the result of a liberal bias and dislike of people being self-reliant. Most of the media people tend to be liberal. Liberals tend to favor government being large and the people being dependent. They see it as the government taking care of you. The government looks after you. They're doing these things for your own good. And they think people are inept or incapable. And they think probably of the people in New Orleans with those cardboard signs. And those people need help. And they're probably right. Those people did need help. They were helpless. Generations of welfare had created a whole helpless generation down there. And so that's the liberal bias. When they present the militia, they usually talk about crazy nutcases or isolated individuals, usually individuals and not parts of groups. The militia is a broad-based organization of people, all the people. It's open to everybody. And we're not nuts and crazy people. We're normal people. And the media seldom shows that. I mean, we get good press locally. I live near Reading. And the news reports here have all been favorable because, we're out there doing good things. And we're out searching for lost children or missing people. It's hard to be too critical of that. So, we can't change the viewpoint of the media and the way they present us, the way they always talk about nuts being in the militia. They seldom cover real militia units. So I can't say that we're actually doing anything about the media presentation of us, other than we're being what we are, which is a law-abiding group of citizens who are looking after our own interests, looking to be self-sufficient, self-reliant. So if a disaster occurs, we can take care of ourselves. The recent tornadoes in Oklahoma often showed those people, the Oklahoma citizens, not only took action when the tornadoes were coming, we have lots of acts of heroism, especially some of the school teachers, but parents who were grabbing their kids and putting them in the shelters and getting down and responding efficiently and quickly. And then when the tornado passed, they were up, they were out, they were helping their neighbors. Nobody was standing around in Oklahoma getting out their cardboard and their magic markers and writing, "Help me." They were taking action by and large. And that's not always easy to do in an emergency like that. And that's the spirit we're trying to develop, not the urban spirit of New Orleans where everybody's a pathetic loser.
Now, a lot of people say that militias are racist groups. How would you address that?
Well, that would be a typical ignorant, uninformed criticism. I'm not sure why they would say that other than just to sort of paint with a very broad brush that the militias are bad and scary and evil. We're not. I mean, we don't encourage racism. We don't tolerate racist remarks. We don't actually conduct an interview ahead of time and quiz everybody about their racial beliefs or their sexual orientation. We don't get into that. The only thing we really get into is, do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in freedom and liberty? Do you believe in self-reliance and law and order? And as long as they go along with all the normal American philosophies of life, they're welcome to join. If somebody, and I can recall about 2 years ago, we had an individual who occasionally made racist remarks, and he was invited to leave. It was disharmonious. It was disruptive. We definitely have a majority of Christians, some Jews, in the membership, and they're not very tolerant of bigoted behavior. And I have to say, I'm not going to protect anybody who's a racist just to encourage membership or something. We just don't encourage it, don't really tolerate it. I mean, you could be a racist, I suppose, and you could still be in the militia. And if we don't hear you making stupid racial remarks, you're probably okay. But it's just not a major issue. It's certainly not a qualification. We don't have any specific racial requirements or anything. Anybody who wants to show up is welcome to show up.
Now, this may sound like a very ridiculous question, but I get asked it. How does the militia feel about the Second Amendment?
I'm not sure the militia feels much of anything. But we do have viewpoints on the Second Amendment and all the other amendments. One of the foundations, one of the basic premises of being in the militia, and it may be the only requirement, although it's not hard and fast, is that you have to believe in the Constitution of the United States. You have to believe it's a legal document. Most of us believe it was divinely inspired, but you have to believe it's a good thing. And you have to be prepared to support and defend the Constitution. That's pretty much it. You have to be prepared to defend and support the Constitution. And all the amendments are part of the Constitution, the Second Amendment in particular. The Second Amendment, I always like to point this out, in all of the Constitution, and it's 5 or 6 pages of handwritten large documents, only one place in the entire Constitution did the founders specifically state what was necessary for the defense and protection of a free state. Only one thing. In all of the documents, in all of the articles, all the amendments, only one thing did they state was specifically necessary for the safety and security of a free state, and that was the militia. Now, that was 230 years ago when they wrote that. Since then, lots of people in the government, mostly liberals, have tended to like to lose sight of that. Now, for the first 150 years, nobody lost sight of that particular fact. The militia was important. The militia was the people with their musket at home or their rifle, ready to stand defense of their neighborhood, their community, their state, and their nation if necessary. Well, people who like government have since tried to convince us that they can take care of us better than we can take care of ourselves. And that goes for the nation as a whole. So we have a standing army now and a standing military. And, to a certain degree, that's fine. We need a certain number of active duty soldiers and airmen and sailors. But the bulk of the power, as long as it rests with the people, and that rifle in their closet or shotgun or whatever it is they choose to have, gives them a certain power, a certain authority. And as long as the power and authority rests with the people, the nation is in balance and harmony. When the power rests simply with the government, you start to slide toward tyranny. Now, I'm not the first guy that ever thought of that. Thomas Jefferson is famous for a quote. He said that when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. But when the government fears the people, you have liberty. Well, if everybody in the country had an AR-15 or another viable weapon in their closet, the government would fear the people, and we would have liberty. If we were like Switzerland, where everybody has a rifle in their closet and is part of the militia, there would be a very, very low crime rate. Everywhere in this country where you've got gun restrictions that are insane and clearly anti-constitutional, you have extremely high crime rates like Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia. If you were able to X out those areas where the Second Amendment has basically been suspended and the right to keep and bear arms has been taken from the citizens, like Chicago and Philadelphia and Detroit, if you eliminated those, the United States would have one of the lowest crime rates in the world. But because of those places, we're one of the highest. We believe in the Second Amendment and all the other amendments and all the other rights that we think were given to us by God and enshrined in the Constitution.
Amen. What is the California State Militia stance on supporting law enforcement agencies?
Well, I like to say, to make it clear, that as long as the government and any government agency supports the Constitution, we will support them. And generally speaking, nowadays, that's certainly true of most law enforcement agencies. Certainly all the local and state agencies are still law-abiding constitutional organizations. Up in the north, where we have the Cottonwood platoon, the Cottonwood Militia provides community patrols. And because almost everybody up there has got a concealed carry permit from the local sheriff, it's an armed patrol. So you have carloads of guys driving around or pickup loads doing patrols in Cottonwood. And it has had a dramatic and positive effect on the local crime rate. They've only made a handful of arrests, and they have made some, but mostly they simply deter the criminals from coming to the little town of Cottonwood because the chances of getting caught there are so much higher than anywhere else in Shasta County. So we've worked with the sheriff to organize that. We call into sheriff dispatch every time we go out so they know we're out and about. And it's worked out really well. The sheriff came down to the Cottonwood and had a meeting at the community center where he explained it. While the effects of this recent release of tens of thousands of inmates from the prison, they call it the Prison Realignment Act, that's released basically tens of thousands of convicted felons onto the streets of California. And that's had a dramatic effect on crime rates all across at least northern California. And the sheriff says that's been true for Shasta County, and he has his little charts, and it shows that crime is up everywhere in the county except for one place, Cottonwood. And he openly admits why that is, and it's got nothing to do with him. It's got to do with the militia. So in that one instance, it's worked really well. In search and rescue operations, same sort of thing. Both in Sonoma County, Shasta County, Siskiyou County, we've done search and rescue operations where the local sheriff's departments simply lack the resources. They used to have enough money to fund search and rescue units, usually volunteers, but with sheriff equipment and training. They don't do that anymore. The money has been shifted. I mean, the state is still working at record levels of spending, but they've been cutting police, fire, all kinds of normally traditional government roles so that they can spend more money helping the people who can't help themselves. So welfare, food stamps, and Medicaid's up, but police and fire is down. So we're trying to support our local law enforcement agencies by filling in some of the gaps that's been left behind.
Well, Major Haagenson, it just sounds like you guys are doing a top-notch job up there. I am part of the Southern California State Militia, and we follow your lead on. We pretty much would be nothing without your leadership and what you're doing. So we down here really do appreciate your guidance and your leadership. Is there anything else you'd like to add or say to our listeners?
Simply one thing, I guess. That would be to emphasize the fact that it's a team. The whole militia is a team made up of the people, by the people, for the people. I didn't invent the militia. I didn't invent the concept. I didn't organize it. I don't create the policies. But I'm happy to be a member of the team and helping to make it all happen. And there's a place for everybody in the militia. We're not all infantrymen. We're not all medics. We could use a few more drivers and a few more cooks and a lot more of everything. So anybody who has a skill or an interest will find a role to play in the militia, serving their communities, protecting themselves and their families.
Well, great. Now, I'd like to move on to a very interesting topic and something that I just got wind of recently and didn't know this about you. I consider you my friend, and I had no idea that you were this novelist. We'd like to hear about your new book, what brought about that book, and just kind of talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, many years ago, about 18 years ago, I went sailing, and I had a lot of time on my hands. I was busy sailing for just over 6 years. During that time, I wrote a book about many of my experiences in law enforcement and the military, and I livened it up with a little bit of fanciful material, which makes it a novel as opposed to a actual book. And so I took 2 years during my sailing, and I wrote this book about the Templars, as if the modern Templars still exist as they did in times of old. They were involved in the Middle East as crusaders and protecting Jerusalem and the Temple of Solomon. And that's how they get their name, the Templars. So in my book, they still exist, and I just tell about the stories of what they do in the modern world, countering drug lords and terrorists and the forces of evil. And it's kind of a long book, but I hope an entertaining one. The people who've read it generally seem to have enjoyed it with great enthusiasm. So I've been very happy about that. It takes place in California, Europe, Central America, Polynesian islands, places I've been to and liked. So I include them in the story.
What provoked you to write this book in the first place?
That's a good question, and I'm not exactly sure of the answer. But I had a strong push to do it. I'm using a good deal of the funds that I make from that to support the militia movement, and I kind of wonder if maybe God didn't push me in that direction to do that very purpose, to help support the militia movement. It was fun to do. It was entertaining to do. And many times when I was sitting down at the word processor or dictating it, I felt the words just flowing from me like they were coming from somewhere else. So it had a bit of a mystical quality to it, and I hesitate to even take credit for the whole thing myself. But I felt compelled to write it, so I wrote it because I thought I was supposed to. That's why. It's not a good explanation or a clear one, but that's the best I can do.
Well, very good. Yeah, it seems that militia groups across the United States seem to be forming at a really exponential rate. It's pretty amazing, and it's pretty amazing. People like the Southern Poverty Law Center and different groups are really just discrediting what this movement is all about. And it's obvious that our country is in trouble. You ask everyday citizens. I talk to people at the gas pump, and you can just see it in their eyes. They know something's wrong. They know something's up. And I think that this is a great empowering tool. And I would personally like to see more people become empowered and not be victims.
Well, I would too. But I suspect that it's not for everybody. I think those who are meant to join the militia, to step up and take responsibility, know who they are, and hopefully they will fulfill that role and show responsibility towards themselves, their families, and their communities. I think for whatever reason, it's a bit like Noah and the ark. Most people just aren't going to get the word, and they're not working on the ark. Building a militia is a lot like building an ark, and I think to some degree it's for the same reasons. I think something bad is coming. I don't think it's 40 days of rain, 40 nights of rain, but I think it's something equally bad, and it's coming soon, and the militia and the citizens who make it up and their families are part of the ark, and they're the solution to the problem. Even though we don't necessarily know exactly what the problem is, we're getting glimpses all the time. A lot of people are joining the militia. As you mentioned, it is growing exponentially. California now has the largest militia in the country, and it's growing rapidly, and we're setting an example for everybody. I think some of that is because of the power of the federal government, and every month we see another example of how they're getting more and more powerful and less concerned about us. Lately, it's proof that the IRS really is singling out Tea Party groups and conservative groups and religious groups and harassing them and picking on them and keeping them from getting special tax-exempt status while the liberal groups get it because they support the president. Some people are waking up to that kind of action. The wiretapping on reporters' phones and emails and seizing phone records from the AP, the lies and stories we hear at congressional hearings from federal administrators and secretaries of different branches. I mean, it's not good what's going on in Washington. We're watching the complete moral breakdown of people in power, and that's a disturbing and frightening reality. It's not fiction or imaginary. It's really happening. You just have to turn on a viable news source to see it.
Well, very good. Well, I'd like to put a plug out there for your book. Where can they find your book at?
Templar Secrets is the name, and it can be found on either eBay, where I sell it myself and I'll sign it for you, or on Amazon.com.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you taking time to come out here and to answer these questions. You've answered the questions great. I'm sure it's cleared up a lot of misunderstandings that people have about the militia. And the closing, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just that people think about it, think about whether they should join or not. Give us a check, come out to a meeting, come out to a training exercise, see the people. I think you'll be surprised when you find out we're all just regular people. Don't want to sit around and be helpless and depend on the government to take care of us. Most of the people who come out and train with us actually think it's fun. I was in the Army too long to think that, but I can understand that other people think it's fun because it is good to mix and meet with people of like mind and like spirit. So I invite everybody to think about it and come out if you feel like it.
Great. And keep in mind, folks, you can find out more on Modern Militia Movement. Just go into the California site and you'll see all three of us, the Northern California, Central California, and Southern California. We have meet and greets weekly. We have foxhole meetings. One of the things that we do ask is that you come to a meet and greet, check us out, see what you really think about us. We can vet you, you can vet us, and we can go from there. Well, thank you very much. Have a great day, Major, and we'll be looking forward to talking to you in the future.
Okay, until next time.
Well, this concludes our very first podcast. I want to thank you so much for taking time to listen to us. Look us up on modernmilitiamovement.com/group/Southern California State Militia. And also like us on Facebook. We've got a ton of likes out there. You can find us on facebook.com/S.C.S.M.Militia. Thank you guys. Have a blessed day. Keep fighting the good fight. Until the next podcast, Godspeed.
What are you